Welcome to meeting number 38 of the Standing Committee on Science and Research. We're meeting today to resume our study on Canada's dual use and defence research needs. I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and the members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either Floor, English, or French. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. I would also like to remind witnesses that committee members may ask questions in either French or English. If you will need interpretation, please take a moment now to prepare your earpiece and select the listening channel you need in advance to take full advantage of the time allotted for questions and answers. I would like to welcome our first witnesses here today. From the Department of National Defense, we've got Dr. Kate Kaminska, Director General, Bureau of Research, Engineering, and Advanced Leadership in Innovation and Science and Defense Research and Development Canada. Wendy Hadwin, Assistant Deputy Minister, Policy, Industry, and Colonel Mark Prince, Director of Land Force Development, Canadian Armed Forces. And from the Department of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, Dr. Adam Green, Director, National Security Policy. We will start with the Department of National Defense. You have the floor for 5 minutes. Ms. Hadwin and Dr. Kaminska will share their time. We will go then to Dr. Green afterwards. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister for Policy Industry at the Department of National Defense, and we are all so grateful to be invited to be part of your study. I personally am here for 2 reasons. Because the role we are playing in policy to develop and implement Canada's defence industrial strategy, and because Canada's dual use and defence research needs are essential to the growth of our defence industrial base. Au fil de l'an dernier, le Canada a investi 65 milliards de dollars dans la...
Year, Canada invested $65 billion in defense and security. $1 million. In March 2026, we achieved a 2% threshold in defense, as determined by NATO. We are now on the right track in order to achieve NATO's new objectives, that is 3.5% of the GDP.
This ambitious target, we want to build and sustain our defense industrial base and learn from real-world examples such as the conflict in Ukraine, where we know that efficient R&D, innovation, and adoption has been operationally decisive. While there may be more than one definition of dual use, we consider it as technologies, goods, and services that can have an application in the commercial, civilian market, or the defense, security, and intelligence market. One example of dual-use technology is drones, or unmanned autonomous systems. Drones can be used for intelligence collection, reconnaissance, and surveillance, or to deliver a military effect. They can also be used for tracking wildfires, for example, or environmental monitoring. The Defence Industrial Strategy is positioned to accelerate the adoption of Canadian defence and dual-use innovations in drones and many other sovereign capabilities, and turn that into a strategic advantage for the Canadian Armed Forces, which is why Colonel Prince is here, and I hope he will have a chance to share with you his operational experience. Ça va sans dire que nous travaillons étroitement avec nos partenaires.
It goes without saying that we're working closely with our federal partners as well as the provinces and territories, even the municipalities, and of course the research institutes. This is now a national effort.
For the system to work as it should, we know industry requires a clear demand signal from national defense. We also know we want to protect our investments and our industrial advantage, which is why cooperation with Public Safety Canada is so important and why Dr. Green is ready to speak more about this. I would close my half of the remarks by highlighting just some specific actions under the Defence Industrial Strategy that may be relevant for your study. First, we established a new Science and Research Defence Advisory Council to strengthen collaboration and facilitate open discussion between federal partners and post-secondary institutions on specifically defence and dual-use R&D. We are accelerating the security clearance process for defense sector personnel and establishing a standardized accreditation process for industry-operated secure facilities. We have invested $244 million in defense and dual-use technologies through the Defense Industry Assist stream of a National Research Council IRAP funding program. And we stood up Borealis, which is why I'm pleased to turn to Dr. Kaminska to finish our opening remarks on behalf of National Defense.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm pleased to be able to discuss the Bureau of Research, Engineering, and Advanced Leadership in Innovation and Science, otherwise known as Borealis, and its role in strengthening Canada's defense and security innovation. As the committee has heard from previous witnesses, Canada has world-class talent, cutting-edge research, and globally competitive firms. The challenge is ensuring that sovereign Canadian technologies can move quickly from research and development into operational use in support of Canada's defense and security. Borealis was established as part of Canada's defense industrial strategy to help accelerate that transition. Its focus is on strengthening the pathways between research, development, testing, and operational adoption by better connecting government, industry, academia, and military end users around shared mission priorities. A key component of this effort is the establishment of Defense Innovation Secure Hubs, otherwise known as DISHs. These hubs provide secure environments where Canadian companies, researchers, and government can work together to design, prototype, test, and refine their technologies. In November 2025, a pilot dish was established in Halifax, focused on the undersea domain, including autonomous systems, advanced sensing, and AI-enabled analytics. The pilot has already supported collaborative testing and experimentation activities, helping Canadian companies evaluate and refine their technologies.
Dr. Kaminska, if you could wrap up quickly.
Absolutely. In closing, Borealis represents an effort to strengthen Canada's ability to translate research excellence into operational capability. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Dr. Green.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and honorable members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before this committee today. My name is Adam Green. I'm the Director for National Security Policy at Public Safety Canada, and part of my remit is to oversee the activities of Public Safety's Research Security Centre. To begin with, I want to properly frame the remit I will speak to you about today. The Research Security Centre is at the heart of Canada's approach to the challenge of research security, a topic I know has been at the core of the concerns of this committee. For the committee's clarity, while we do provide information to researchers and academia on a range of security-related topics, during which questions about the security process can be raised, responsibility for personnel vetting and for delivering security clearances is beyond the scope of the Centre's activities. Comme vous le savez probablement, les menaces à la sécurité.
As you no doubt already know, the threats to national security that affect intellectual property and technological know-how have been growing since last decade, whereas Canada is one of the world leaders when it comes to research and technology.
Fields such as artificial intelligence, quantum, and aerospace make the entire research ecosystem particularly vulnerable to threats such as espionage, foreign interference, and theft. What makes us innovative and competitive can also make us a target. To tackle this head-on, in 2022, the federal government made significant investments to enhance Canada's research security posture so as to ensure that Canadian research, innovation, and intellectual property would be protected. Une partie de ce financement a servi à établir le centre.
This funding was used to establish the Centre for Security and Research, which helps to bolster the academic world in Canada in order to obtain advice and orientation with respect to security in their research. By bringing this together with a number of politics and adaptive processes over the last 5 years,
Canada.
the research security position of Canada has turned us into a world leader in the area. I'm very proud to be here before this committee and to have the opportunity to
Commune. Les play.
and the community. In Europe and Asia and Asian, they turn regularly towards us and
Tirer des leçons de notre approche.
wonder how they can draw lessons from our approach.
security is that our policies are both centralized and have a real ability to prevent potential national security threats before they can manifest. We do this by reviewing a proportion of federal grant applications to ensure that the risks relating to the theft of sensitive and dual-use intellectual property is mitigated. No other country in the world has a centralized function to do that. Similarly, the named research organizations list, our Sensitive Technology Research and Affiliations of Concern, or STRAC policy, together are one of the first of its kind in the world and is referenced by several of our allies in their own research security policies and documentation. This Made in Canada list is backed by a methodology and a set of tailored indicators that help us determine whether a foreign institution is connected with the military or state security apparatus of a foreign country that poses a national security risk to Canada. The Centre has been successful in building awareness of national security threats within the Canadian research ecosystem. We've delivered hundreds of what we call safeguarding science workshops. We've conducted over 140 national security reviews of grant applications. We've connected the right expertise with the academic sector, and we've built a network of hundreds of stakeholders across Canada and internationally. Most of this would not have been possible without buy-in from academia. Finally, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the great work this committee has undertaken as part of its own 2024 study on the security of research partnerships. J'ai le plaisir d'annoncer au comité que le Centre de la Sécurité
I'm pleased to share with this committee that the Research Security Center has been working with its partners to help implement this committee's recommendations. One of the key recommendations made to Public Safety Canada was to encourage and assist post-secondary institutions in adopting measures to protect researchers and students who are the target of foreign interference on campus.
Who are spread out geographically around the country have been working with the Office of Counter Foreign Interference Coordinator to coordinate visits to universities across Canada to speak directly with staff and students on foreign interference challenges on campus and to offer guidance and support in addressing those issues. We have also worked with our colleagues in other government departments, as referenced by my colleagues, to provide targeted and timely briefings to university stakeholders and researchers on a variety of issues. These collaborative efforts have made Canada's research security posture much more resilient to emerging threats. Threat actors will continue to try and adapt their tactics, and academic partnerships will wax and wane with a range of countries, but we are confident the necessary tools and policies we have put in place will continue to adapt so as to address evolving concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Green. And with that, we're going to go to our first round of questioning, 6 minutes each, and we'll begin with MP Ho.
Thank you, Chair. My first round of questions are going to be for the officials at the Department of National Defense and the Canadian Armed Forces. So in your opening remarks, you mentioned the war in Ukraine, and so I want to follow up on that point just for a little bit. So in 2024, Canada donated an advanced long-range air defense system to Ukraine called the NASAMS or NASAMS. Yet we do not operate any medium or long-range surface-to-air missile systems ourselves here in Canada. So we're here today gathered to talk about military spending, and it's important to examine our capabilities gap and the liberal incompetence that's expanding that gap. So I guess this question is for the Colonel, but anyone from the Department of National Defense can answer. Could you please explain Canada's current surface-to-air missile capabilities?
So I'm not familiar, particularly familiar with air defense. It's not my specialty, but we can certainly look into that.
Okay, so I guess in your view, how can, on that point, how can we discuss further military spending when we can't defend our troops from modern threats? I mean, it seems like we're procuring advanced weaponry that we ourselves don't have for other countries. Is that a problem, or do we think that we need to also procure weapons for our own troops too?
Yeah. So I mean, we have procured ground-based air defense for our troops, and though I'm trying to find the nexus to dual use here.
I mean, what I'm asking here is what. So the weapons that you're talking about for our own troops, is that more advanced than what we procured in respect to the NASAMS in 2024 for Ukraine, or is that comparable, worse, better?
Yes, I'm not an expert on air defense, but can certainly take your question to our SMEs.
Okay. So, I guess we'll turn the page. So I'm looking at the Department of National Defense website, and there's a whole document, whole policy on gender-based analysis plus at the National Defense. So I'm wondering if any one of you could elaborate on, when it comes to contracts, procurement, what role this policy plays in all the work that you do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. The gender-based analysis is one of several policy requirements on accessing funds brought to us by the Treasury Board Secretariat. So we need to answer some key points about the impact of some of our investments, but we didn't come prepared to talk about all of defense investments in this committee. We brought research and development.
Okay, so in the research and development sort of space, I mean, there's contracts, there's grants that are overseen. So does race, does gender ever play a role in the selection of these contracts or grants? Maybe Dr. Kaminsky can speak to that, because she does a little bit of on the grants.
Yes, I can speak to this certainly from the perspective of the Bureau of Research, Engineering, and Advanced Leadership in Innovation and Science. So as you might be aware or not, we have one of the key initiatives are the Defense Innovation Secure Hubs. And in February of this year, we have launched a call for proposals for the next round of Defense Innovation Secure Hubs, targeting 2 technology areas, one of them being quantum science and the other being uncrewed systems, both of which have a nexus to sovereign capabilities. As part of the evaluation process for that call for proposals, we certainly take GBA Plus and other inclusive access considerations as part of the evaluation process. This ensures that we access the best and the brightest talent across.
So what you're saying is gender and race are or other identity markers are factors that you would consider in that consideration process.
It is a factor in the evaluation criteria of the proposals that we receive. They do undergo a gender GBA plus analysis. Yes.
Could you elaborate on how that would sort of bolster our defense capabilities? Or
well, certainly in the research space, we consider the variety of views and perspectives to be a strength of any kind of research proposal. This has been borne out through previous initiatives that we have undertaken under the program that we're using, which is called IDEAS. So we continue that best practice to ensure that, again, we attract a broad range of stakeholders and innovators to bring the best and the brightest to be able to work on hard defense and security R&D problems.
how would the GBA analysis, the gender-based analysis, promote that? I mean, wouldn't you? So you're saying you wouldn't consider the best applicants if it wasn't for the GBA policy?
All applications are evaluated on merit first, and then there are a number of factors that we consider as additional.
So merit, but then you say also GBA.
We are going to have to move on to a next set of questions, and with that, I'm going to go to MP McKelvey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 3 questions in 6 minutes, so hopefully we can get through these. My questions are for Dr. Kaminska. I'm wondering if you can speak to the engagement that you've had with the academic community, how you're using them in an advisory role, and really how you're using them to identify the dual-use technologies that we should be investing in and advancing here in Canada.
Absolutely, I can speak to that, and I might also turn to my colleague Wendy Hadwin, because the primary engagement of mechanism that we have with our academic partners are through the working group that has been established with particularly the U15 universities, but also more broadly under the Defense Industrial Strategy. The committee has now met, I believe, 2 or 3 times, and each time we've offered, them insight into our plans, and certainly have solicited active feedback to ensure that what we are proposing to the government also meets the needs of the academic sector, who we consider to be absolutely key stakeholders. They provide the talent base for any kind of R&D activity that we do, and we do collaborate quite closely with academia, Defence Research and Development Canada, so we use that forum primarily. However, I can also add that for Borealis, we hosted an industry and academic engagement day early this year. We had over 300 participants from, again, not only the academic sector, but certainly the academic sector was very well covered in that. And I don't know if my colleague Wendy wants to add anything to that.
And likewise, can you share how you're engaging with other government departments? And one in particular that I'm interested in is with the Canadian Geological Survey, recognizing that if we are going to be increasing surveillance, drone capabilities, there's a lot of data that can be acquired while we're doing that using, LiDAR, gravity mag. So how are we working with them to ensure that we're really getting, dual use in that space as well?
Thank you for that question. So I will say that Borealis is designed very much as a whole of government effort. So it is not just the Department of National Defense, but we are working very closely with our colleagues at Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, the National Research Council, CSE, as well as other government departments on an as-needed basis. You're absolutely right that the Geological Survey of Canada would be an important stakeholder as we move into more of the ISR applications that you mentioned. We don't have yet an ongoing project with them, but as it is a whole of government initiative, I fully expect that as we move into the domains that require that kind of data and that kind of expertise, we will absolutely ensure that we collaborate with them. Borealis is designed in that way, in fact, to leverage the whole federal ecosystem.
And my third question has 2 parts. So the first part is, in your engagement with the universities, are you developing blanket IP and security clearance requirements and working through the process? It will be a bit of a change for academics to participate in this research. So how are you doing that? And then the second part is, as you define dual-use research, are you intentionally casting the net wide? I think the United States has done a very good job of that, ensuring things, medical cancer, a major outcome for soldiers, realizing that that's been included under dual use. Likewise, there are Superfund sites for environmental contamination. So they've been casting that quite broad. So can you speak to those questions? So one, the blanket relationships with the universities in IP and security, and then the second one, and how wide you're casting dual use.
Thank you for that question. So I will answer the second part first, which is to say that the work of Borealis is driven by the sovereign capability areas that are defined in the Defense Industrial Strategy. And as you may know, they are in fact pretty broad. So they do include things like medical countermeasures for example, chemical, biological, nuclear, radiological events, which we need to protect our armed forces from. So things like biotech absolutely would be included. However, we do have to prioritize. We were just stood up in September, so at this moment we are prioritizing 3 major sovereign technology areas. First being sensing, which is covered by our Maritime Defense Innovation Secure Hub. Second being quantum, and third being uncrewed systems. Those 2 latter areas are the subject of the call for proposals, which I alluded to, and we hope to be able to announce who we will be working with in those domains soon. For the first question on IP and collaboration with the universities, I will turn it over to my colleague ADM Hadwin to chime in.
We have different elements of the federal. Thank you for the question. different elements of the federal family have different lines of effort on intellectual property. We are all bringing them all together so that we can make sure that we do the very best job of privileging Canadian IP and that we don't accidentally put structures in place that will disadvantage us, because we know the IP is an essential part of how we maintain and grow an industrial advantage. There are provisions in the Defense Industrial Strategy for us to come together, and we will be working on that as a matter of priority.
Thank you. I'm going to end it right there. Thank you for your questioning. I'm going to go on to MP Blanchette Joncas.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je vous félicite.
Thank you, Chair. Congratulations for this excellent job by being the chair today. My question is for Ms. Hadwin. Can you tell us who currently sits on the advisory body for defense and science? Thank you, Chair, for this question. I have the list before me. Of course, it begins with a number of federal departments, including ours, National Defense. We also have Science, Economic Development and Innovation, the Finance Department.
Le Conseil de recherche sciences naturelles
The
et
Natural Research Council,
Dr. Kaminska,
and Dr. Kaminska's agency, which is, sorry about this, but I didn't bring the French list with me, but we have the Science and Defense Research and Development Canada. We also have the National Research Council, the Academy for Defense Canada, as well as the Telecommunications Security Centre of Canada. As well, we have the Foundation for Innovation of Canada, the U15, which is an umbrella organization covering the 15 largest universities. We also have Polytechnique Canada, University Canada,
Canada et
Technological Access Canada, and at this time we also have the University of Toronto, University Laval, the University of Sherbrooke, UQAM, University of Alberta, Dalhousie, and UBC. Thank you very much. Why was this never made public?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. It is now. So you deemed it was important that you would be putting in place an advisory board, but it wasn't enough and important enough so that you could divulge its makeup to the general public. We've been working very hard since the Industrial Defense Strategy was launched, which was announced on the 17th of February. We're now June 1st, and we were successful in bringing together this committee.
On n'a pas tardé.
We did not delay. Well, for transparency purpose, could you tell us which criteria was used to choose the members of this board,
Je représente
of this council? Well, I would say that I don't represent the official announcement of the committee, and I think that it might evolve depending on discussions underway. It is an open committee from the experience I've had to date, and we are prepared to invite all of those who are involved with the topics at hand at any time. So, Ms. Hadwin, again, I repeat my question. What criteria was used to choose the members? Thank you for that question.
en partenariat avec le
We began in a partnership with the U15 and all of the government agencies that I have just listed. Then we identified that there are a number of universities, but that is not a limited list. We are open, but it is impossible
d'une table
to include and to bring together all of the institutions around a table at once. We began with this, but that is not the end of our work. So, Madam Hadwin, which criteria did you use? Did you pick the names out of a hat? Was this a draw? How did you work this? I thank you for the question. We had begun by asking
pour avoir le maximum
what the track we should pursue should be in order to optimize as much as we could the innovation and the systems we have in place across the country. We wanted to glean the representation from the representation for various universities, both small and large across the country. Then we focused on our priorities when it comes to research and development, and to that we also added the experience aspect. So you don't think that those are criteria to see what your orientations are? Well, perhaps you could complete your answer later and answer me seriously, but I'd like to ask this. Who makes the final decision? Is it Borealis? Is the advisory board? Is it the armed forces? Who makes the decision?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for that question.
Dans le premier temps,
First of all, the committee is an advisory committee.
nous sommes en
We all have programs that we manage
mandat.
who provide money, funding, but we also have the mandate to develop strategic policies. So this allows us the approach that we intend to put in place because we're at the very beginning of this process. I'm trying to understand something about your strategy, not answering, but who makes the decision? Is it Borealis? Is it the council? Who makes that decision? Could you outline that strategy to us? Well, thank you for having repeated the question. Well, it's not entirely a decision-making body. It is an advisory committee. So if a decision needs to be taken regarding a specific program, this is the responsibility of the department that has both the authority and the ability to deliver the program. It is first and foremost a table to coordinate efforts. Of course, when it comes to Borealis, my colleague here has the necessary authority to make decisions.
Our second round. I think she's done. Thank you. We're going on to our second round of 5-minute questioning. We're going to begin with the MP Mahal.
Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here. I wanted to start with Dr. Kaminska in regards to the Defense Industrial Strategy Committee commits to creating a new Science and Research Defense Advisory Council in 2026. And I found that it was quite difficult for your co-partner, Madam Hedwin, to answer that how the committee will be defined, who will sit on it, how the members will be chosen, and why they were not made public so far. Do you want to add something to it? Can you elaborate that how the members were chosen really quick, or should I move on?
I do not have that information, so no, can move on, please.
So let me go to my next question in that case. The Liberal government has produced strategies, panels, and advisory councils, but soldiers still need equipment. How does this new defense research structure actually get technology into the hands of Canadian Armed Force members faster?
Thank you for that question. I'm happy to answer. Borealis was designed with intention to ensure that, in fact, we prioritized the need to equip our men and women in uniform. So as you will see, and perhaps this is reflected in the answer that we're providing, we're taking very much what we call a crawl, walk, run approach. So rather than spending a lot of time trying to define the perfect system, we're learning as we go. So, for example, while we're still building Borealis, we are already leaning out on launching and delivering on a number of initiatives, including the Defense Innovation Secure Hubs that I mentioned, the first one of which was announced in November. And the subsequent ones will be announced very soon as well. We're also collaborating.
So that means that we should have a timeline for all these projects to be launched on time to make sure that the real purpose is served on time and they meet the reality of on the ground. So my next question is, what is the average timeline from DRDC supported research to actually Canadian Armed Force fielding?
Thank you for that question. It is a question that's very difficult to answer because, of course, it depends on the specific technology area that you choose. So, for example, if you look at a domain like quantum technology, it is not yet a domain that's mature enough to be able to field a lot of capabilities quickly. We're certainly getting there, but the science in many ways has to still catch up. So we are investing in that case in both the science that needs to happen to get us to the point where we'll be able to develop practical applications of these technologies.
Thank you.
How,
So can you, to date, name one recent DRDC-backed innovation that moved quickly from research into operational use by the Canadian Armed Forces, to cut it short?
yeah, a good example of that, I think, is our work on the over-the-horizon radar. And as you will see, and you might have heard, there was a partnership with our Australian counterparts that was announced not too long ago to be able to field the capability quickly. That is something that we're very proud of because the foundational science was done at DRDC.
Thank you. Now I would want to move to Colonel Prince, if you may answer. If a domestic industrial preference slows delivery on urgently needed equipment, does that create operational risk for Canadian Armed Forces?
Sorry, can you repeat it?
If a domestic industrial preference slows delivery of urgently needed equipment, does that create operational risk for the Canadian Armed Forces?
I don't know. I'd have to study that to get back to you more fulsomely.
Was it, from your perspective, from your experience as a colonel, why do you find it difficult to find an answer on that a simple question on a layman's standard?
Sorry, what's the approach? I'm just trying to understand the approach of your question.
So my question was simple. If an industrial preference slows down the
I'm
delivery...
going to have to interrupt. I apologize. We're over time, and we're going to go on to our Liberal member, MP Deschamps-Thériault.
Merci beaucoup. Ma première question serait pour Dr. Kaminska.
Thank you. My first question is for Dr. Kaminska.
Programme.
So the Canadian Innovation Council has more than 120 federal programs which enables fostering research. But could you please explain this briefly? Borealis will make it possible to better tie our partners and Innovation Canada with other programs. My question is this: how will we ensure that these promising technologies can be passed more quickly in a more secure fashion from the concept stage to the operationalization stage?
For that question. It's an important one and one that we've certainly thought about very deeply. So on the first point of there being over 100 different innovation programs, you're right. The innovation landscape is quite congested, and some call it fragmented. One of the purposes of Borealis is to help us evaluate which of that suite of government programs is most applicable to defense and security, and which of those programs we can best leverage to do exactly what you described, which is to ensure that we can drive the programming in such a way that it results at the end in an operational capability. How do we do that? There are a number of steps that we're taking right now to ensure that we can make that transition easier. Number one is ensuring that we involve our Canadian Armed Forces members from the outset. So what tended to happen in the past is that innovation and capability development followed what I would call parallel tracks. But right now, we're working very closely with our Canadian Armed Forces partners, such as Colonel Prince here, to ensure that we engage them at the very early stage of development. So one example I can give there is that Borealis is working to support the Army's Minerva initiative, which is an initiative initiative to ensure that our Army members have access to the latest and greatest drone technology, because, as you know, drones are becoming kind of a staple of the modern battlefield. So in that way, we're working with Colonel Prince and his organization to quickly define requirements. And we have, in fact, a call for proposals, which is called the True North Precision under the IDEAS program. And the intent there is to source Canadian-made cost-effective drone-based targeting and range-finding capabilities to enhance battlefield awareness. And again, the key to success is ensuring that we're in lockstep with what the Army in this case wants, and that the R&D really meets the needs of the armed forces. So that is one. The second part, on the other end of the spectrum, if you will, is that we want to make sure that there is a pathway to procurement. And in that respect, we're working closely with our procurement authorities within the Department of National Defense, and increasingly the Defense Investment Agency as it stands up, to ensure that we can build that pathway from idea through research and development into fielding the technology. And I would say we're going even further than that, thinking about potential scaling and commercialization down the road by engaging our capital market colleagues through collaborating with folks like BDC to ensure that there's also private capital available for our Canadian companies to scale their innovations.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, le temps est limité. Il me reste 1 minute. Madame.
Thank you. I have only 1 minute left. Ms. Hatwin, could you please speak to your collaboration with universities? How do we ensure that we are ready to comply with our security requirements? That is, in terms of preparedness and capabilities and tools. How do we ensure successful collaboration with the universities, all the while honoring our security requirements when it comes to research? Thank you for the question.
Comme vous imaginez, c'est super.
So, as you can imagine, it is extremely important that we have a close collaboration with all of the universities and research centers, because this is key to achieving a Canadian edge. And certainly we don't want to lose that edge, that advantage, if we haven't sufficiently focused on the defense of our research. This brings me to share the floor with Dr. Green, with whom we work very closely in order to reach this point, in order to safeguard.
Now go on to MP Blanchette Joncas for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Madame Hadouin, les membres du Conseil.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hadwin. Members of the Advisory Council, the members who will be sitting on it, will be able to submit projects, they'll be able to receive funds, and take part in programs that will contribute to their own efforts. So my question is what kind of conflict of interest mechanism have you implemented to avoid the fact that a certain members or organization will benefit from undue advantage?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for your question.
Un comité de décision.
The committee is not a decision-making committee. It is an advisory body that advises us in the area of the implementation of the defense strategy. The committee as such does not have any funds to deliver, nor does it have any decisions it can take with respect to our investments. So there are no funds, but they will direct the decisions. Who decides on which agenda will be debated when you meet? Is this the members of the committee? Yes, the committee is co-chaired by the U15 and the Department of National Defense. So who decides on the topics to be discussed during these consultations, these meetings? The agenda is drafted based on the implementation of the industrial defense strategy, which means that this covers all of the topics that are part of the strategy, either any barriers in order regarding securing or research or security clearance, up to the implementation of our sovereign capabilities. And what about the recommendations and the reports? Will all of this be made public? The council is just at the beginning of its existence.
On sait-
No,
on vient d'avoir
We don't know. So we have received a list today, and you'll decide at a certain point you'll make these consultations public. Is that correct?
oui ou
y
c'est non.
avait-il une...
Yes or no? Is that a question? Well, will these be made public? We began the work.
Le choix de réponse, Madame Hadouane, c'est oui ou c'est
So the choice of an answer is either yes or no. Ms. Hadwin, of course, transparency is important for us, but you have never publicly disclosed this list. And today, here at the committee, I have to ask for that list, and you cannot tell me why this was not posted on the internet site. So that's where we have transparency, I take it.
Have to stop there. We're going to go to MP Lawton now for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're doing a bang-up job in your role. Appreciate that. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. Ms. Hadwin, you had referred in your opening statements to the increase in defence spending relative to Canada's NATO commitment and the intersection that has with the dual-use policy and the broader defence strategy. I'd like to just build off that for a moment, because I'm assuming you're aware that we've learned through order paper questions and other government information that over $10 billion of the so-called new federal spending on defence is actually just reclassified money that the government was already spending. Things on infrastructure, pensions, Coast Guard. Are you aware of that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. In order to get to 2% this year, there was an additional $9 billion. That money was invested in 4 key areas, and I'm only able to speak to it because I was part of the technical briefs for that.
I'll just be more specific. Are you aware that some of the government's stated increases in defense spending have actually just been reclassification of existing government spending?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. What I am aware of is how hard we worked to move spending that we had in mind for the future into the present. So we accelerated some things that were in planning.
So I apologize. Just yes or no. Are you aware of this? If the answer is yes, I can ask about that. If the answer is no, I can ask about that. But I'm just not getting an answer to the question.
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
What I can say is that we moved spending that we had planned for the future into the present.
Okay.
So we brought forward things that were in planning.
Okay.
We either did more, that's the infrastructure spending, or we did...
I'll ask the question in a different way. Is there any spending that the government is lumping under the NATO spending category that previously would not have been in that category? Is there any spending that the government is now saying is defense spending, that percentage of the GDP, that a year ago would not have been construed as that? Okay, the answer is yes. I was just hoping you'd acknowledge that. That's fine. The concerns I have about the dual-use strategy is that when we are looking at things that can serve civilian needs and also defense needs, I feel we are moving more towards a direction where it's easier to have these blurred lines where a program or acquisition that isn't actually increasing our defense capability, isn't actually increasing our security capability, is being classified as that and being used to basically artificially inflate a number. So what's being done, and I don't know if anyone is willing to answer this, what's being done to ensure that we aren't doing that dual use actually has a defense component that increases what we want our defense system to be able to do?
I'll start. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. If it's okay with you, I'll start and ask Kate to follow up. So for us, the key element of the defense industrial strategy is the 10 sovereign capabilities. So for the first time ever, you have the Department of National Defense being very public about its demand signal. That is in response to what we heard from industry in the course of the development of the strategy, which was a very strong interest in understanding what we needed. This is the beginning of our attempt to clarify where we have a need, and that sets the stage then for the dual use aspect of it.
Just because we've had, the Prime Minister talk about telecommunication systems airports, critical mineral infrastructure. These are all very important things, but these are not going to help our soldiers have the tools they need on the front lines, such as submarines and aircraft are. So what's being done to ensure that these vaunted increases to our defense spending are actually increases in our military capacity as a country?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. There is a significant chapter on supply chain in the Defense Industrial Strategy, because we know that the size of the country and the requirement to have a bigger defense presence in Canada calls on us to be more clear about our needs in terms of supply chain.
Could you be more clear in the answers, please? I'm just asking if you are aware that $10 billion has been reclassified to give the government credit for something they aren't doing, which is increasing defense capacity. Like, why is this being allowed? And we're supposed to be proud of this as a country when we're just moving around numbers on a balance sheet.
With that, I'm going to have to stop. Perhaps you can provide a written response to the question that my colleague has presented. I'll go now to MP Noor Mohammed for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. Ms. Hodden, in 1 minute or less, I know my colleagues have been trying to finalize the answer to this. Can you please talk to us, finish sort of your answer on how you're working with the academic community to ensure they're ready for security requirements? I have very limited time, so if you can keep the answer brief, that would be great.
I'm happy to lean in on this one. This is a joint approach across government. We have worked hand in glove with the academic community now going back to 2016, 2017. And this is because this is sort of an all fronts approach whereby a lot of the research and development has migrated away from government facilities into both the academic and the private sector. And so all of the safeguards that we were previously sort of focusing on government facilities has now moved into the academic sector, requiring us to work together as the programs and the resources expand.
Thank you very much. One of the things that we hear a lot about when we talk to Canadian innovators and Canadian companies is that they want the government of Canada and they want Canada's military to be their customer. And sometimes it is more challenging to become a customer of the government of Canada or Canada's armed forces than it is to be the customer of other governments or other armed forces. What are some of the things that we should be thinking about at this moment in time when Canada is working on, and the Prime Minister has been very clear on making sure that we have our own independence, that we look at sovereignty as something that is essential, not optional? What are some of the things that we need to be doing from a policy standpoint to ensure that those directions and that directive and that sort of sense of purpose for Canadian innovators being able to sell into Canada, the Canadian government, and of course our armed forces is front of mind?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We heard a lot of these same points as we began work on the Defense Industrial Strategy. And that's one reason why there is a new program, the Regional Defense and Innovation Initiative, delivered by the regional development agencies of the government across the country so that small and medium-sized businesses can directly make applications to sell to the government, to national defense, particularly in the dual-use space. Of course, there's more we can do. The country is largely small and medium-sized businesses, and we think that working with universities and Borealis will give us a chance to be more exposed.
So if we then go to the question of how Borealis can take this on intentionally, one of the concerns obviously is that these small and medium-sized businesses, they grow in Canada a little bit, they get customers elsewhere, and they recognize or they realize that perhaps they're not going to be able to continue their growth plan here. And of course, that's one of the things that we want to change, and obviously decisions that we're making are going to help inform that. What else should we be doing, and what are some of the things that you guys have seen, or you've seen particularly through the work that Borealis is doing as it gets organized, in ensuring that those SMEs can become larger global players based in Canada?
Thank you for that question. I think it gets to the heart of what we're trying to do with Borealis, which is to ensure that we retain the talent that we have in Canada, we retain the IP, and we allow our small and medium-sized companies to grow and thrive and stay in Canada as opposed to moving elsewhere. There are many components. There's not one simple answer to this. I think it's a suite of measures taken together that are going to help this problem. One of them, and I believe this is a key one, is that we need to work with venture capital and the capital markets to ensure that we provide them a signal as to which of these great Canadian companies, really have the cutting edge technology, so that they can secure private investment. And I think this is one of the objectives for the Defence Innovation Secure Hubs, is that we will be bringing Canadian innovators into an environment where they can test and showcase their technologies to the end users, be it our Canadian Armed Forces members or our national security partners, and through that get a sense of where they can improve their technology to perhaps secure that first contract, that first buy. That will also send a signal to the venture capital markets as to which of the innovations are ones that we can expect to sell to, not just in Canada but also abroad. Canada is a relatively small defense market.
I'm going to have to stop you there, Doctor.
Absolutely.
With that, I'm going to go on to a final additional round, and we're going to go with MP Ho. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to change gears here. In March 2026, the Liberal government announced that it is spending $200 million on a space pad in Canso, as you're probably aware, but the photos look nothing more than a gravel pit. And last week we had the president of the Canadian Space Agency on this very committee, and she said that it was the Department of National Defense who was involved in the procurement of this space pad. So I just want to confirm that the DND was in fact involved in the procurement of this space pad.
I can only speak to Borealis, and certainly it is not part of the Borealis program.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Indeed, it was the Minister of National Defence who announced this investment as part of moving out the Defence Industrial Strategy's focus on space launch as a sovereign capability, which is a priority because at the moment everything that Canada and our innovators send into outer space is going not from Canadian soil. The amount of money also involved other 3 Canadian companies.
So I want to, just following up on that. So did you or did any Department of National Defense official verify the physical state of the Canso site before the so-called investment was made? Or do you know if a DND official visited the site?
I do. The National Defence did verify the site and the proposals, and additional environmental assessments and other due diligence was done on all the aspects of it.
It looks just like a gravel pit, and it's not a fully built-out facility. Is that correct?
I do not know what space launch looks like. And I think that this is something I can take on notice and come back in writing.
So what exactly is the Department of National Defense leasing for $200 million? Is it a launch pad that we're getting? Is it a launch services? Is it, access? Or is it, what kind of infrastructure are we actually, because $200 million is a lot of money. It's not a rounding error. So could you just elaborate on that?
Thank you for the question. In the course of preparing the Defence Industrial Strategy, we identified space launch as a really important opportunity because of the intersection of the operational need so much of our military's domain awareness in the future will likely come from space-based capabilities, but also because of the industrial opportunity. So many of Canada's industries are doing really exciting research that we could be using in Canada to achieve an operational and industrial advantage. The program specifically...
Okay, yeah, we understand that space is
Yeah,
important.
sorry.
We can all agree on that. But what is specifically this $200 million investment, which was made just a couple months ago, and the Liberal press release came out from the Liberal Defense Minister, talked about defense industrial strategy and dual use, which is exactly what we're studying here today. So what exactly are we getting? What objective are we achieving with this space pad? It doesn't seem like it's just a gravel pit. So what operational requirement is this gravel pit, which many are describing it as a parking lot, actually meeting? What kind of operational requirement is it meeting?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. The announcement the minister made had 3 elements to it. One of them is joining NATO's Starlift, an alliance project on space-based capabilities. Another is a competition for 3 Canadian companies to prepare light lift, and they are meant to be ready by 2032. So the commitment is for 3 companies to enter into a competition to launch and deliver a space launch capability.
I want to talk my last question about Maritime Launch Services, the company involved in this Liberal boondoggle. It has a pattern of missing deadlines. Back in 2017, it was projected to launch 8 rockets by 2022. It only launched 2 rockets to site. To date, one of them was a student-built rocket. One was launched in 2025, but it was a commercial suborbital test. Neither of them has crossed the Cameron line. Are you confident Maritime Launch Services will deliver? And if so, what happens or if not, what happens? What kind of penalties are there if they miss a deadline?
Well, I'm going to have to stop there. We're over on time, but perhaps you could provide a written response to the question that the member has posed. With that, we're going to go for 5 minutes to MP Rana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all the witnesses for your valuable time. Dr. Kaminska, Canada's defense industry contributes nearly $10 billion to our GDP and supports over 81,000 jobs. Borealis is designed to shorten the distance between the promising ideas and impact. So what concrete measurable milestones will Borealis use over the next 3 years to demonstrate that it's accelerating that path?
Thank you for that question. We certainly have set specific key performance indicators for ourselves. One of them is benchmarking ourselves against what the current programming timelines are and aiming to accelerate those timelines. So if I can give a specific example of the call for proposals for the Quantum and Uncrewed Systems Defense Innovation Secure Hubs. We launched the call for proposals in February. It was the proposals, and we received well over 100, were evaluated by a large contingent of subject matter experts and Canadian Armed Forces members within a period of 2 weeks, which is much faster than the standard review process for a project of that scale. And we are getting ready to announce the winners so that the work can start. So that is one tangible example, one small indicator, but certainly the timelines from idea to implementation are well known among the suite of government programs that exist. So we will be working with our partners to ensure that we streamline processes, we lower the barriers to entry for folks that apply to these calls for proposals, and ultimately want to get there faster. Another key component, of course, will be how we tie into procurement. That is still an active area of work, and again, we're working with the appropriate procurement authorities, whether it be procurement authorities within the department or the newly established Defense Investment Agency to do that. But those are the types of metrics that we are after.
Thank you. Defense Research and Development Canada has $4.23 billion in North American Aerospace Defense Command science and technology investments over 20 years. So where exactly does Borealis fit, and how are you making sure it adds value that DRDC currently can't?
That's an excellent question, and thank you for it. We are collaborating. This is the value of Borealis being based in Defense Research and Development Canada, because we are co-located with the same of our colleagues who are working on the NORAD Modernization Science and Technology Initiative. And in fact, working on our first Maritime Defense Innovation Secure Hub pilot. We're using that pilot to accelerate the delivery of some of the capabilities that were under the NORAD Modernization Science and Technology Initiative, specifically accelerating the development of the next generation of underwater sensing technologies in partnership with the industrial partners and the academic partners that we have in the dish. So in fact, Borealis is serving as a mechanism to accelerate the impact of that investment.
Thank you. Ms. Hedwin, Defense Industrial Strategy is committing $6.6 billion over next 5 years to grow defense R&D by 85% by 2035. So what incentive structures or accountability measures are being put in place so that the procurement officials are rewarded for speed and innovation?
Thank you for the question. We're working closely with all of the procurement partners in the research and development space. We have an advisory committee, a consultative committee that I've talked already about. But you can already see with different announcements from other ministers, including the Minister of Industry, the minister, other ministers of the Crown, to deliver the funding associated with the Defense Industrial Strategy.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to end this round of questioning and this panel with our final MP questioning. So MP Blanchette-Jancos.
Adouane, comment vous allez garantir que les universités de
Well, Ms. Hadwin, you are nevertheless going to guarantee that smaller universities and technology transfer centers will receive their share of research and development rather than seeing this funding only allocated to major institutions? The Defense Industrial Strategy represents an opportunity for all of Canada to come together under a very urgent and important mission. With these sovereign capabilities, these represent our priorities. This does not, however, prevent the fact that all of the universities and industrial sectors come to our assistance in the implementation of this mission, which is expected to deliver capabilities of Canada that represent an advantage for us. So, Dr. Kaminska, Borealis, a number of experts are saying that the Canada Defence and Research Canada and the National Research Council work more on a program basis rather than being achievement focused, and even
éviter de fonctionner en...
How will you prevent them from working in a silo? How will you be able to collaborate efficiently with all of the other partners in this research ecosystem?
Question. It is a very pertinent one. So the one difference that we're trying to make with Borealis is to focus our partners around missions. It's a mission-based approach to innovation as opposed to a project-based approach to innovation. So for example, in the Maritime Defense Innovation Secure Hub, we're supporting the NORAD modernization mission set. What we find, or what we are finding through that experience, is that the mission-based approach serves to coalesce stakeholders towards a common goal and a common objective. So it is not a bunch of small projects, but rather it's a large mission set with different contributors.
Si vous voulez renchérir, n'hésitez pas à nous répondre par écrit, ça serait important.
We would like to get more information in writing if you could. So how do you measure success? Is it based on a number of programs launched, the technologies that have been integrated or adapted by the armed forces?
It's all of the above. So because Borealis is still new, we have some baseline key performance indicators that we have established. However, as I mentioned, we're working on this crawl, walk, run approach. So as we develop Borealis further and learn from the early implementation activities, such as the Maritime Defense Innovation Secure Hub, we will certainly endeavor to develop more targeted key performance indicators along the lines that you have described, but is still very much a work in progress.
Well, thank you for that. And I'd like to thank our witnesses for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. That will end the first hour and 15 minutes of questioning. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. And with that, I'll suspend. to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and members. First, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for the interpretation, either Floor, English, or French. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And I would like to remind witnesses that committee members may ask questions in either French or English. If you will need interpretation, please take a moment now to prepare your earpiece and select the listening channel you need in advance to take full advantage of the time allotted for questions and answers. I would like to welcome our witnesses from Cambrian College of Applied Arts and Technology, Dr. Mike Comito, Director, Research and Innovation, by video conference. From the Canadian Global Affairs Institute, Dr. David Perry, President and Chief Executive Officer. From the Canadian Shield Institute for Public Policy, Dr. Matthew Demota, Research Director, Emerging Technology and National Security. And from the Université de Sherbrooke, Wendy Terrien, Associate Vice President of Government Relations, and Alexandra Blais, Scientific Director, Institut Quantique. Dr. Comito, we will start with you. You will have the floor for 5 minutes. We will then go to Dr. Perry, Dr. Demota, and finally, Ms. Terrien. Oh, you are on mute. You can begin.
Very sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the members of the committee for the invitation to appear today. My name is Dr. Mike Comito. I am here on behalf of Cambrian College in Sudbury, Ontario, where I serve as Director of Research and Innovation. Cambrian is a college with deep roots in Northern Ontario's industrial economy. Our work is closely tied to mining, critical minerals, applied research, workforce development, and the practical challenges that come with operating in remote, harsh, and technically demanding environments. That foundation shapes how we see this study. Cambrian is already active in areas that matter to Canada's dual use and defense-related innovation agenda. We are not starting from scratch. We are already working with industry, training the workforce, and supporting the applied research and testing that help move technology from an idea into something that can actually be used. One example is our Center for Smart Mining, where we support industry-relevant research and technology development in real operating conditions. That includes underground environments that are highly useful for testing technologies in GPS-denied, low visibility, and communication-constrained settings. Those are conditions that matter for mining, but they also have clear relevance for autonomous systems, remote operations, and other dual-use technologies. We also have strengths in electrification and battery-related testing through our Valet Electric Vehicle Lab. That work supports performance validation and helps industry better understand how vehicles and systems will perform in demanding environments. As Canada looks at next-generation platforms, electrification, and resilient supply chains, that kind of applied capacity becomes increasingly important. Cambrian's success in this space comes from the role colleges play in the research landscape. We work at the applied end. We help companies solve operational problems, test technologies, train talent, and adopt new tools and systems. We are often working with small and medium-sized firms that need a practical partner, access to facilities, and a team that can move quickly. That role is important because Canada does not struggle only with generating ideas. We often struggle with adoption. We have world-class researchers, capable firms, and strong institutions, but many promising technologies still face a difficult path between early development and real-world use. Canadian colleges help close that gap. We do that in a few ways. First, we train the people who make innovation usable. Technicians, technologists, operators, and other skilled workers are essential to any serious industrial or defense capability. In sectors like critical minerals, advanced manufacturing, electrification, and remote operations, that workforce is central. Second, we give companies a place to test and validate technology in real conditions. That matters because end users need confidence. A technology that works in theory still has to prove itself in the field. Third, we help connect regional strengths to national priorities. In Cambrian's case, that means bringing Northern Ontario expertise into conversations about critical minerals, supply chain resilience, autonomous systems, and domestic industrial capacity. This matters for Canada's broader research and innovation system. Colleges are sometimes left out of the discussion when people talk about science and research, but they are a key part of how research becomes usable. Universities, companies, government labs, and colleges each play different roles. Canadian colleges contribute through applied research, industry collaboration, technology validation, and workforce development. That is especially valuable in dual-use sectors where technologies need to work in real environments and be supported by a skilled labor force. Cambrian's opportunity is clear. We have existing infrastructure, we have industry relationships, we have the relevant expertise. We operate in an environment that reflects many of the conditions Canada needs to be able to work in, especially in the north and in resource-based sectors. There is real value in making fuller use of that capacity. From our perspective, the question is not whether colleges belong in this conversation. They clearly do. The question is how Canada can make better use of institutions that are already helping to train people, support firms, and validate technology in practical settings. Thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. We're going to go on to Dr. Perry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for the invitation to appear today. My opening remarks, I'm going to concentrate on three issues: the need for clarity, priorities, and pathways to capability. On clarity, it's welcome to see the various movements, some of which you've just heard about in the prior session from National Defence, including Borealis and the creation of dishes, as well as wider efforts at the National Research Council and regional and other academic pursuits. Recognizing that this is still early days, only 104 days by my count since the industrial strategy was introduced, it will be important to articulate clearly what the intent of these respective lines of effort are, what they're all intended to do, and how they're supposed to connect and complement each other. Similarly, with increased interest from Canada's post-secondary institutions and ongoing interest and enhancement to the industrial technological benefits policy and other industry-focused measures, the wider research and development effort in defense is spread across government research, industrial R&D, and academic activity. Who is doing what in Canada and what the intended relationships between these efforts are will be important to sort out as well. And finally, looking internationally, Canada has signed multiple new agreements for enhanced defense and security cooperation in the last year, often with associated research agendas. How these international collaborations connect to domestic ones will be important to clarify too. The key here will be aligning these new ventures with our long-standing defense research and development partnerships with the United States of America, which has given Canada unique access to much of the world's cutting-edge innovation and helped foster a 4-generation-old North American defense, industrial, and development ecosystem. Across the Canadian defense landscape, 1,000 flowers have been planted. Some are already blooming, but we need to know what the overall garden is supposed to look like. With respect to priorities, in my view, a weakness of our defense innovation ecosystem historically has been an overly broad focus relative to our resource commitments. In the past, we've both underinvested as well as spread what we have committed too far, too broadly. We are planning very consequential increases in defense R&D, which is welcome, but some of that has been directed, as you've heard, to new initiatives that will dilute some of this effort. Beyond that, the existing agenda was already expansive, with the Defence Research and Development Canada organization itemizing 16 high-level priority areas, including science and technology for NORAD modernization. It's not yet fully clear how Canada's sovereign capabilities will change those priorities, but those 10 high-level capability designations and more than 30 subcategories give ample opportunity to lengthen an already long list of priorities. And lastly, as the committee's last session heard, the term dual use is quite broad, even though it's very much in vogue. There's little consensus around what the term does or should mean with any level of precision, further complicating efforts to focus. The contours of what counts as dual use need better clarity. Overall, the greater prioritization to areas of real importance would maximize our potential return. And finally, amidst all these efforts, we need to ensure that there are credible pathways for turning research, development, and innovation into actual Canadian Armed Forces capability. That's long been a deficiency of our system. The draft legislation proposed for the new Defence Investment Agency proposes a means of procuring without competition defence supplies or services that have received federal funding for research, development, and innovation, which is welcome. It's been a long-standing source of frustration for participants in initiatives such as the DRDC Ideas Program that they could be highly successful at solving a defence problem, yet unable to sell the Government of Canada that solution. This measure, which would allow purchasing successful measures that were funded by the Government of Canada, would go a long way to fixing this if it is successfully implemented. This pathway between innovation and capability would be further complemented by enhancing the minor capital portfolio at National Defence. My colleague Alex Salt and I just published a paper, which is available on the Canadian Global Affairs Institute website, arguing that increasing the funding available for smaller projects and making it easier to move more of that money quickly would significantly help. It would get innovation into the hands of the military on one hand and provide more contracting pathways for small and medium enterprises on the other. We think it's a win-win proposition to get more of the smaller firms that can truly drive innovation into the Canadian research and development ecosystem while quickly equipping the CAF. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Perry. We're going to go on to Dr. Demota for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the members of the committee for having me. I'm Matthew Demota. I'm Research Director of Emerging Technology and National Security at the Canadian Shield Institute for Public Policy. We work on creating solutions to enhance Canadian economic and digital sovereignty. Defense spending generally is a notoriously poor long-term economic investment, though it is important and essential for national security. The real value that we're going to get out of the promise from the defense industrial strategy has to do with how we leverage dual-use technologies, multi-use infrastructures, and spillovers into other sectors, and that won't happen by accident. The risk in not delivering on that is that we spend to meet our targets of 2% and 5% of GDP on defense spending without building anything lasting or durable. A further risk is that in rushing to meet those targets under external pressure, we damage an already strong research ecosystem, which has deficiencies and issues around IP and other areas, but is nevertheless world-class. What we need is an ecosystem where non-military research thrives freely, defense needs are communicated clearly, and the pathways between them are well-defined, focused on investing in deep tech and broadly dual-use technologies with targeted defense-specific investments where needed and where essential. Regarding readiness, firms and institutions need to be equipped with the right governance tools and expectations to be able to meet this need. This requires a clear definition of what dual use actually means in the context of Canada's strategic goals. We've heard general definitions, but we need a very specific one about what we're trying to achieve. Without it, we risk over-designation, which might lead us down various negative paths. This also means developing a readiness assessment framework so that labs and research centers and also SMEs understand the research security, cybersecurity, and other requirements for dual use and defense work. Institutions also need increased capacity for tech transfer and greater strategic guidance from government to meet the complexity of what is expected. Finally, Canada needs to close the gap between ideas and production. So co-locating manufacturing with innovation infrastructure is the precondition for spillover to actually happen. Manufacturing infrastructure has its own gravity, pulling in supply and value chains, expanding the ecosystem where technology can be developed, commercialized, and scaled, and where good jobs are actually created. And the greatest opportunity for this is in high-tech areas like quantum. Regarding IP and intangible assets, Canada's difficulties commercializing the vast amounts of money that we put into R&D are well known. Fixing this requires IP guardrails attached to public funding and institutional capacity to mobilize intangible assets on behalf of Canadian firms, both defensively protecting IP and helping smaller companies compete against foreign competitors wielding large patent portfolios as moats. Regarding standards shape what gets built, by whom, and under what conditions. Canada largely adopts the standards that others set. A dedicated standards office capable of coordinating across defense and dual-use domains and positioning Canadian innovations as reference points in allied processes, particularly in NATO, is essential. In dual-use domains specifically, we need standards that govern how technologies pass between defense and civilian contexts so that firms and institutions understand how this movement should be happening, defining the appropriate controls, data handling, and the levels of research security and so on required at each stage. These practices currently exist in many fragments. The requirements of the DIS mean that we need to make sure that we have a more coherent and clear framework for institutions. The committee, it's my recommendation that the committee should recommend an operational definition of dual-use tech geared towards deep tech investment, procurement, and R&D decisions, co-located manufacturing alongside every dish and every hub that we build to serve the DIS needs, an innovation asset collective to mobilize and protect IP, specifically in defense and dual use, with guardrails attached to public funding to ensure that we capture IP and leverage it properly, a readiness infrastructure and a readiness framework covering assessments, research security support, and capital access for smaller firms, and a calibrated designation policy that protects what needs protecting without undermining Canadian innovators or the independence of the research ecosystem. Canadian Shield stands ready to support the committee and the government, if needed, on any of these issues at any request. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Demota. And finally, Ms. Tadier. Nope, Mr.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs les membres du comité. Merci de donner l'occasion de contribuer à cette...
Chair, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this discussion. My name is Alexandra Blais, Scientific Director of the Quantum Institute at the Université de Sherbrooke. The Université de Sherbrooke ranks among Canada's research-intensive universities and is recognized for its collaborative research model. We are also a founding partner of the Quebec Innovation Zones in quantum science and microelectronics, strategic ecosystems at the heart of today's security and technological sovereignty challenges.
Strategic contribution to Canada's defense objectives, and that investments in research universities should be recognized as part of Canada's effort to meet its NATO commitments. Research universities like the Université de Sherbrooke do not only produce knowledge, they build strategic capacity for the country. Je vais maintenant développer 3 points que nous considérons importants.
I would now like to expand on 3 important points. First, fundamental research. When we talk about dual-use technologies, attention often transfers to their applications. While these applications are essential, we must recognize that investments in fundamental research contribute just as directly to the security of Canada and its allies. Quantum technologies are a particularly clear example. They have civilian and military applications in computing, sensing, and communications, but key challenges remain unresolved. We still need to understand how to make these systems more reliable, more robust, more integrated, and useful. This is why fundamental research is indispensable. Companies play an essential role in developing products and scaling them up, but they depend on universities to solve the scientific and technological bottlenecks that remain unsolved. This is not unique to quantum science. In the life sciences, fundamental research protects against biological threats and strengthens public health. In the humanities and social sciences, it sheds light on social acceptability and the effects of disruptive technologies on conflict dynamics. Focusing solely on ready-to-use technologies would make us dependent on other countries for the foundational building blocks of our own security. This is why investments in fundamental research in strategic sectors should be recognized as a legitimate component of Canada's efforts to meet NATO targets, particularly through funding for the 3 granting councils and a Canada Foundation for Innovation in order to preserve our long-term strategic autonomy.
Focusing solely on ready-to-use technologies will make us dependent on other countries for the foundational building blocks of our own security. This is why investment in fundamental research in strategic sectors should be recognized as a legitimate component of Canada's effort to meet NATO targets, particularly through funding for the 3 granting councils and the Canada Foundation for Innovation, in order to preserve our long-term strategic autonomy. Deuxième point, la recherche partenariale et les...
Second point, partnership-based research and company creation. The Defense Industrial Strategy and Budget 2026 rightly recognized the role of SMEs in strengthening Canadian defense supply chains. But a key lever of the strategy lies within our universities. Most SMEs do not have the capacity or the long-term horizon required to conduct advanced R&D on their own. By connecting them with university research capabilities, we can accelerate their technological development and their integration into defense supply chains. Universities also generate new companies and new innovation ecosystems. In disruptive sectors, these companies often emerge from years of research, training, and shared infrastructure. For the last 10 years, the Innovation Partnership Entrepreneurship Program at the University of Sherbrooke has demonstrated the effectiveness of this model. Deployed at the national level with a defense and dual technology component, it would concretely accelerate the R&D capacity of Canadian SMEs. And finally, my last point, my third point, talent. Allow me to emphasize this key point: everything depends on talent. Canada's ability to develop science and technology for its security depends entirely on the women and men who choose to dedicate their careers to research, to discovering new knowledge, and applying it in service to Canadians. In this regard, the decisions recently taken by the federal government, particularly the indexation of scholarships and investments in research chairs, are steps in the right direction. Canada must now consolidate this effort through predictable support for the people and the research environments that train them. Regardless of whether innovations are that reinforce national security emerge from a university, national research center, or company, they will be built on the people trained in our universities. In conclusion, for Canada to respond effectively to its defense commitments, it must recognize that universities are not peripheral to this effort. Rather, they are a strategic pillar. Investing in science and partnerships with SMEs and in talent development is not an academic luxury. It is an essential condition for Canada's national security. Thank you very much for your attention.
Witnesses, we're going to begin with our first round of questioning, 6 minutes each. We're going to begin with MP De Ritter.
Thank you for everyone coming today. Dr. Perry, I'm going to start with you a couple questions on procurement. I align very much with what you said about needing to have our procurement process updated to the current ecosystem that we see today. And one of the things that I've been saying over and over is we need to get out of 1999 and update our procurement processes to ensure that innovation and small business can be at the forefront of helping with our R&D and our dual-use technology. As an expert in defense procurement, what struggles or failures do you identify with Canadians' defense procurement today?
I'll touch on two. One is the lack of clear pathways that I touched on earlier. So I think particularly for smaller companies, innovators in the Canadian ecosystem, they basically have two bookends. You can get access to innovation funding with no real clear procurement pathway, or at least an easy one at the end of that, programs like IDEAS, Innovation Solutions Canada. Or you've got big projects, which are generally won by large primes, often foreign, and you can be involved in their supply chain, but that's an indirect route. I think we need more of something in the middle, a bridge between early phase research and a stepping stone pathway to something larger. And I think more broadly, and there's a big challenge I think that writ large are going to have with the industrial strategy, for a whole host of reasons, our system has emerged over time to really try and minimize risk, technological risk, delivery risk. And if we really want to drive innovation, foster more of that, the whole system needs to change its mentality to be less averse to things that are less well tested, not as clearly defined, because that's how you get innovation at the end of the day.
So some ideas that I came across my desk in having conversation is even going to industry with a problem. Instead of industry trying to sell to government with what they think is a problem to solve. Would you agree with that approach?
I would, and we've done some of that, but I think the thing that we've lacked is then a mechanism to buy the solution. So you've gone and had that discussion. We've not had a clearly constructed system to go from that to actually getting that into the hands of our soldiers or aviators or sailors.
I agree. At what point do you think our ability to procure technologies quickly, fast enough, becomes a national security issue, not just a procurement problem?
I think it's one right now.
Absolutely. Practically speaking, what does this liability look like for Canada? So Canadians are aware.
I think what it means is we're overly reliant on other people's technology, for one. It means that we're not equipping and modernizing as fast as we should be. And I think that it's meant that we've historically under-delivered on the innovation and economic growth potential that we could otherwise be achieving through the Canadian innovators, Canadian small companies, and the wider research and development ecosystem in Canada.
Would you agree as well that IP retention is a problem in that we're innovating in Canada, but then we're not retaining the IP, therefore we don't own the technology, and then we buy it back at retail, that's a piece of what's happening here?
I think the whole intellectual property ecosystem is complicated. I'm not an expert in this particular area, other than I think that there's a number of aspects where we really got to be a little bit more specific and focus on like what elements of that current ecosystem do we find lacking. We have different circumstances where we can get that from abroad or have some of it go overseas, but is it really about control, about maintaining access? I think some more definition about specifically what we want to see out of a greater focus on intellectual property is warranted.
I saw, Dr. Moda, is it Demoda? Demoda, thank you. I saw you, body language that you wanted to comment on that as well, so if you'd like to just comment on our IP and where, because you had mentioned it as well in your speech.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Dr. Perry, first off, that we have to be specific about what we're talking about. I think there's a lot of different areas where we have IP leak. I think there's just a fundamental layer where technology that's developed in fundamental science, just that never goes to a tech transfer office, it never becomes commercialized, and so those ideas just kind of go out into the world. And to some extent, we want to support open science where it's appropriate, but I think having some more controls and making sure that we're channeling that into the right avenues to make sure that we can benefit as much as possible and reuse IP as much as possible in Canada. And then when we're talking about IP that is commercialized and then goes out into the market, I think we lose it in a number of different ways, including companies getting bought up at small stages because they don't have capital to grow and stay in Canada. That's a partnership issue and it's a capital issue. I agree with Dr. Perry about the aversion to risk. And so I think embracing risk, but also trying to de-risk certain elements that don't need to be high risk would be important for that. I think that a more comprehensive approach to IP retention in general is extremely important.
Thank you so much. I wanted to thank you for coming. I have only a couple of seconds left, and I fully align with what both of you are saying. I hope to see this come in the committee report and some adoption happen through the government, the current government. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're going to be going to MP Rana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all the witnesses for your time. Mr. Bliss, Defense Industrial Strategy is committing $334.5 million to Canada's quantum ecosystem, including $92 million for Canadian Quantum Champions program. Is that investment at the scale and speed needed to keep Canada competitive in quantum for national security purpose?
I think this is a great start. I think the Quantum Champion program was absolutely necessary. There was both a danger and a risk. There was a danger of losing, a danger and an opportunity. There was a danger of losing these 4 companies to the U.S. That was a real threat. But there's also the opportunity of building something great from these companies. However, at the moment, what I can say is that we have 4 quantum hubs in Canada. They have been supported by federal grants. These grants have now have run out, and we are at the risk of losing these 10 years of ecosystem that we have created if there is not further investments in the national hubs that we have in quantum.
Thank you. And quantum technologies are among Canada's most sensitive research areas and among the most globally contested for research partnerships. How do you balance the need to work with international partners against the security obligations that come with research that could have defense applications as well?
Je vais répondre en français pour celle-là. Donc, ce qu'il faut reconnaître, c'est que...
Be answering in French, and what we do recognize is that quantum research, TRLs, for instance, up to higher TRLs, require a great deal of fundamental research. We still have a great of technological challenges to solve. In that case, partnership research with allied countries is something that we need to foster. We are not at the point where we need to close our borders regarding that fundamental research. Rather, we should open them. When it goes to companies, of course, that's another issue. But when it comes to university research, collaboration is the right way forward.
We try to do at the University of Sherbrooke is to really make sure that we have a clear line of sight on whether we're doing fundamental research or whether we are doing research with industrial partners that does need to be more protected. And so depending on where we are on a particular research project, we put the right kinds of protections in place to make sure that industrial supported research is protected and we know who we are working with. We have an ethics committee that does review our more sensitive research to make sure that the mechanisms are in place to do what we need to do and to protect IP, to go to the point that you were making earlier.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, I would love to share my time with my colleague, MP Barrier.
Thank you to my colleague for sharing his time. Welcome to all our witnesses. Professeur Blais, vous avez à juste titre mentionné.
Professor Blais, you correctly mentioned that the best investment we could do is in talent as well. You raised the importance of fundamental research and applied research, and also how important it is to create a bridge between research and companies. How can we, as a government, can optimize the spin-offs from the defense industrial strategy with this ecosystem that exists in Sherbrooke and which is an absolute must? More specifically, when you look at it from a W's perspective. Thank you for that question. Yes, in Sherbrooke, we do have an ecosystem that quantum research, of course, involves. It's more than 13 companies who all study, who conduct research on quantum technologies. Of course, we have to continue to support these ecosystems. As I said earlier, we were fortunate to obtain a Canadian fund for CFREF, Apogee in French. It's funding that it has now ended, but it allowed for the creation of the Quantum Institute, but this funding ran over some 10 years, enabled us to build a capacity that we're at risk of losing. So funding the 4 quantum hubs in Canada is, in my mind, is a priority to meet with those objectives.
Oh, wow. Et bon, l'écosystème de Sherbrooke fait l'envie.
Now, the Sherbrooke ecosystem is the envy of many. We heard about that when there was mention of quantum science. So what does Sherbrooke contribute to this negotiation when we're developing the defense industrial strategy?
Respond in English. That made our, so we applied to be one of the dishes, and one of the things that we did that was very unique was that we brought together all of the partners from our ecosystem. So everyone from the CEGEP to the universities to the applied, and we all worked together. So in C2MI, we all worked together to put on the table our strength that goes from fundamental research all the way to applied, all the way to putting it in the market. And that, when you look at a defense application, what you want to be able to do is to be able to go deep and understand a problem and then go quickly, and that's what we're able to do in Sherbrooke, which is what makes us unique, to putting that into the market. And I think that that's what the defense industrial strategy is looking for, to understand a problem and to put it into the market and to do so quickly. And I think we have that's unique, but it could be replicated across the country. Yeah.
Thank you. That is time. And now we'll go on to MP Blanchette-Joncas.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to welcome the witnesses for the second round. And my first question is for Mr. Black. Could you give us tangible examples of actual works carried out regarding national security, whether it's communication or whether it involves regional development? Well, the first one is SP Quantum, which is a company that comes from the Quantum Institute. This is a student from the quantum industry that started off this company some 10 years ago, which develops quantum sensors. They make it possible to measure specifically sensors. So this company was sent with NASA and SpaceX to the orbit base to conduct specific measures, and it's the MapQuest, the U.S. Geospatial Space Agency. Though this satellite is now in orbit and will make it possible to make these measurements, the RS pathway, which can also help in navigation when one would not have access to GPS. It is absolutely strategic. So this is a very concrete, clear spin-off of fundamental research, which has moved to a very concrete application. I'd like to congratulate you in that you spoke about challenges, because there are many in the quantum world. But today we're all speaking about scientific discoveries, but what we're really concerned with is to maintain the talent here, to safeguard IP and the companies that are born out of this. It's all three, I believe. So if I can come back to some of my major points. Fundamental research is at the very heart of this research. In some cases, there are examples such as one, I say the SB quantum sensors, which are in orbit now and conduct measures, but we have quantum computers as well. There are a lot of technological challenges ahead. Companies need the research institutes. So fundamental research is absolutely key, and it should be done here in Canada to safeguard IP. Talent. If we don't develop talent, companies will have no reason to remain in Canada, like Lock Quantic, which have 70 employees now, that came from the Quantum Champion program, financed by DARPA in the United States, among the 11 companies selected in the developing the quantum computers with ARPA. If the Quantum Institute does not scale up its ability to train students, they will have to turn elsewhere. So the Research Institute must scale up as an industry.
Pour sa recherche quantique, vous en êtes la preuve tangible et concrète.
I think you recognize Canada World for having developed quantum sciences, but do we not really remain a supplier of discoveries and talent for other countries? Or do we have the right conditions in place to develop here, to develop our companies and all of the industrial capacities that derive from this? We were speaking about the fund we just received, which was our very first concern. It was our first thing we did in Sherbrooke. We trained people, then they would go to the United States or to Europe. So by developing companies here, by providing the necessary conditions to students to set up their own companies, quantum, etc., and there are a number of new companies, we allow these students to be trained here and to remain here. So we need to put in place the right conditions. And let me come back to supporting these ecosystems. Without this support, we will lose these conditions. I'd like to know about the main barriers that you face and that prevent university institutions to move to concrete applications, funding, access to public markets, industrial markets, and IP. What kind of barriers do you frequently see? The entire chain. Of course, a lot of what we do involves purely fundamental research. However, at the end of the day, we are launching satellites into orbit. So you can imagine that it involves this whole issue. There are many issues there. The whole chain, and I could come back to these ecosystems. We mentioned strategies to safeguard IP. That's not my field of expertise, but right now I can say that each of the universities has its own strategy in place. Of course, some innovations they fall through the cracks, as we say, but it's important to have a Canadian strategy to keep an eye on how to be smart in protecting our quantum IP would give a competitive edge to our companies. It might also motivate our students to start up more companies because they would have the IP to do this. So as part of what you said, I think that the entire chain is covered. Thank you very much. So now I turn it to you. Apparently in Sherbrooke, we can develop another hub, and we can develop these outside of the central hubs, and we should also focus on these regional hubs. So, Mr. Rien, if you could please speak to that. How are you successful in doing this in Sherbrooke? Because right now this is concentrated in the large universities, which happen to be in large cities.
C'est vraiment grâce.
I believe it is really thanks to two things. First of all, It is a strategic decision that was made 40 years ago at the University of Sherbrooke that consisted in investing in science and technologies without having a single guarantee that we would become the ecosystem we have become. And this decision has enabled us to delve further into and develop our expertise. Later, we had the decision made by the government of Quebec to create innovation zones. And these innovation zones were created in an environment like Montreal, which is not Montreal nor Quebec City, and it is very strategic. And this allowed us to really develop that concentration mentioned by Mr. Blais in order to attract companies, to start up more companies. And this basic funding for fundamental research was 150 million at the time, was the key enabling us to build what we've been able to build.
For that, I'm going to go to the second round of questioning. So, MP Ho.
Thanks, Chair. My questions are going to be for Dr. Demoda. So the Liberal government keeps using buzzwords and empty Liberal rhetoric like sovereignty, buy Canadian, and defense industrial strategy. But your work has raised a concern that some of the early spending is going to Canadian subsidiaries of foreign multinationals. So when we look at the buy Canadian label that the Liberals define, it does not require the vendor to hire Canadian citizens or permanent residents or to require ownership by Canadians. So, for example, you mentioned that nearly 25% of the Liberals' $6.6 billion industrial strategy funding has gone to local subsidiaries owned by foreign multinationals within a week. That's over $1 billion. And this Liberal government is asking Canadians to treat them as authentically Canadian companies under their vague Buy Canadian label. So my question is it really a Canadian defense industrial strategy if the company may have a Canadian address, but the ultimate ownership, profits, intellectual property, and strategic control sit outside Canada?
Thank you for the question. I think we're talking specifically about the ammunition capacity that was being built up. The criticism there was that in certain areas, partnering with foreign subsidiaries made sense because they had the expertise, specifically for nitrocellulose, which is a capacity that Canada does not have and which these other companies do not have in Canada right now. It would have made more sense to partner with a Canadian company. And we have plenty of wood pulp companies and sort of underused capacity that can basically be channeled into that production. And so I think the definition is still in flux. It's still being developed. I would like to see it privilege Canadian companies more than it has so far. But we also have
still in flux, the definition, and billions of dollars are out the door already. Wow, that's incredible. But it's only under the Liberal government's watch can that happen. So Canada has a long-standing problem where public tax money supports research and development, but the intellectual property and commercialization benefits end up outside the country. More than 50% of the intellectual property generated through industry-directed Canadian university research, taxpayer-funded research, is ultimately scooped up by foreign companies. Is the Liberal government repeating the same mistake in defense procurement by failing to put strong enough terms and conditions on IP ownership and downstream economic value?
I think there could be a risk for that, but I think that always national security has very different sort of terms around IP, and I think so far what I've seen from the plans from Borealis, it seems promising. We'll have to see, but I think there's going to have to be significant structural shifts around retaining and mobilizing IP in order to fix those problems, and it's going to be a whole ecosystem approach.
Right. So the Liberals appear to be branding procurement as Canadian in name only, when some of the production or some of the final assembly may happen here. But the ownership and strategic benefits of taxpayer-funded investments may flow elsewhere. So, for example, you mentioned earlier the Liberals announced a $300 million rifle order to Colt Canada, and Colt Canada is owned by Colt CZ Group, a Czech multinational. But the Liberal government is going to say that this qualifies as Buy Canadian because it's under their vague influx definition. So is there a risk that the Liberal defense industrial strategy becomes a capture mechanism for established foreign multinationals rather than establishing a real launch pad for Canadian-owned firms?
I think every part of our economy has been at risk of being captured by foreign companies for a very, very long time under multiple governments. I think this is obviously at risk as well. I think for guns, it's a complicated question. I don't think we're looking to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in building up sovereign, assault rifle capabilities or new companies. I think on emerging technologies and dual-use technologies, those are the areas that we really want to be partnering and making sure that we're building up Canadian capacities and Canadian research to succeed here.
Last question. So the Liberals seem to treat defense industrial strategy as a bureaucratic exercise like everything else. New strategies, new agencies, new frameworks, new acronyms. We've seen the Liberals establish a new bureaucracy, the so-called Defense Investment Agency, and appointed a Liberal insider CEO who stands to make up to $900,000 a year, who happens to be an investment banker colleague of the Liberal Prime Minister while they were at Goldman Sachs. So is one of the Canada's core problems that we need more bureaucracy rather than actually building factories, supply chains, platforms, and hiring Canadians?
I think one of the main issues with Canada's defense industrial policy up until the DIS was that there were too many cooks in the kitchen. Multiple people have said that. There's multiple different ministers and ministries in charge, and that's been the case for decades. I think what the Defense Industrial Strategy does, and it's not perfect by any means, but I think the Defense Investment Agency, Borealis, some of these other institutions are hopefully, and the signal seems to be moving in the right direction, that they are going to consolidate this authority under one body.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, I'm going to go to MP Aolfson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for coming. This is very valuable information. I have way more questions than I can say than I can ask in my 5 minutes here. But Dr. Comito, regarding Cambrian College, you've got a great record here that you've developed a lot of applied research knowledge in mining technology and manufacturing. And a lot of these advanced innovations do have already, as you said, potential for dual use, with our defense sector. So what would your recommendation be for what federal programs and supports you would need to help Cambrian College?
Thank you for the question. I think one of the greatest barriers, especially for continuing the work that colleges like Cambrian and colleges and CEGEPs across Canada are doing on the applied side, is access to funding. And again, for us to do the work with small and medium-sized enterprises that are Canadian-owned and operated and are part of the larger defense supply chain, it's having access to R&D funded dollars so that they can de-risk these ventures, they could work with the college, they can have access to our specialized equipment, our student researchers, and our engineering staff. But in order to do that, we need to have steady and stable supply of funding to help the colleges do the work that they need to do in order to help these companies take their innovation to the next level, commercialize that, bring it to market, and then look for the next thing to do that could ultimately make them more successful and profitable in Canada.
Okay, thank you. Again, you're based on Sudbury, which we know has a very established, mining industry for quite some time. With your work and these programs, do you think Sudbury can build on the, established mining hub expertise to become, a major hub of, applied research?
Yes, thank you for that question. Absolutely. I mean, Sudbury is the world's largest integrated mining complex. There is nothing like this in the world. We have 9 operating mines within our city limits, soon to be 15 by 2030. We have, over 100 plus years of capability in building ruggedized equipment that is meant to operate in harsh environments, environments with high salinity, environments that are GPS denied. So we have that capacity existing that's kind of in the bedrock of our community. And then through our partners, who I think are also quite innovative in the mining industry that has been self-innovative, there's a real opportunity, I think, to take the opportunity that we have now and leverage that expertise and look to see how we can deploy that on, dual use and defense applications. And I think certainly that's without even getting into, our capacity and our expertise when it comes to critical minerals. Again, Sudbury has 8 of the 34 critical minerals that have been defined by the federal government. So certainly there's no shortage of those key minerals we need here in Sudbury to do the work that we need to do to keep pace, to keep ensuring that we are leaders when it comes to mining and dual use and defense. So I think, yes, certainly we are poised to seize the opportunities that are before us right now and ensure that, the work that we've been doing is now, I think, even more increasingly important as we think of it as a national security question.
All All right, thank you. I took particular interest in what you were saying about working in remote and harsh environments. I'm an emergency doctor, and for 13 years, I flew with an air ambulance company that serviced northern Manitoba. We had many of the same issues. We flew to very remote places, had to provide advanced medical care with, no contact with the outside world sometimes, and also working in very hard conditions. It's not easy to find a transport ventilator that works in 40 below, these sorts of things. So that was very pertinent to, experience I've had. Now, with some of the things that you've done, are there things that you're working or that you have established, say, for instance, in rescue or something? I would imagine in remote mining there'd have to be some technology for rescue that works in these areas. Do you have technology already that could be applied by the defense sector?
Thank you for the question. Yes, absolutely. We were actually working with a local partner in Sudbury called Rough Diamond, and that was founded by a former CAF veteran. And he is partnered with a company out of Quebec called Zeal Motor, and they make the Fat Truck platform, which is an amphibious, all-terrain vehicle that can go through swamp muskeg. It can go through waterways. So it's a perfect dual-use application because it's been deployed for civilian uses such as search and rescue, remote forest fire suppression, mineral surveying. But they've been looking to develop new technology that could be onboarded onto this unit that could be deployed for far remote applications, whether it's Arctic sovereignty or any actual defense applications. And so working with that company, they've been able to access our resources at Cambrian in order to then come up with the next, service offerings that could be provided potentially.
I'm going to have to stop you there, but thank you for that answer, and thank you for the questions. I'm going to go to MP Blanchette Jean-Casse for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur Blais, le gouvernement...
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Blais, the government has spoken about creating Canadian champion in quantum research. Should these only be companies, or should they also be strategic ecosystems that can produce talents and IP and economic spin-offs as well? Well, as I said earlier, the Quantum Champion program met with a need, and I completely agree with that. However, there is another major need, that is to support the ecosystems. As I indicated, there is a true risk, as there was a risk of losing our champions to the United States. Now we're at risk of losing the capabilities of the ecosystem we've spent decades building. So absolutely, it's important to have champion ecosystems, and we have these, and we need to continue to support them. And have you been consulted about or informed about the criteria used to identify these Canadian champions?
Donc, on a essayé de faire on fait des représentations.
We do representation.
Donc, des représentations comme on peut au gouvernement.
As much as we can with the government to define who these champions could be. However, not in the specifics. So could you explain to us what kind of criteria would be key to you at the University of Sherbrooke to identify talent, IP, startups, industrial partnerships, and also how would you define the regional spin-offs? What we're looking for is complete ecosystems. It starts with research excellence. If you don't have that excellence, nothing can be built around that. First of all, you have to identify that research excellence, which we have, but we need more than that. You need the entire ecosystem of a startup. For instance,
les composants pour la propriété intellectuelle.
You need the IP components.
Aussi.
As well. In Sherbrooke, we don't only have the Quantum Institute, we have prototyping institutes. That's very important to move from the ideas to implementation. And in addition to Protestipage, we also have S2E. That's a partnership with University of Sherbrooke. And there we develop prototypes, and then we convey them into an industrial process. We have the entire innovation chain that allows us to move from idea to prototype to industrial applications. There are very few such complete ecosystems in the world.
And we will now go on to MP Mahal for 5 minutes.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. I would like to start with Dr. Perry. Dr. Perry, when you appeared before the National Defense Committee in 2023, you said Canada's defense procurement problems were systemic and persistent. that upward of 2/3 of the projects were delayed by a year or more, and that there was no detectable sense of urgency in the system. Since then, has anything meaningfully changed, or are we still stuck in the same cycle of liberal delays, reviews, and announcements?
So that was a few years ago, and a lot has changed then. I think certainly senior level focus, political focus is quite significantly different, and it's moved in the positive direction. I think in my discussions with folks in industry, the big thing that they remark on is that that sense of urgency and actual meaningful change hasn't yet translated down to working level. So day to day, in terms of how procurements are moving, with a couple of exceptions, they're not seeing a whole lot of evidence of the urgency being conveyed at the top.
So it's fair to say that as of yet, there have been some decent announcements made, but still concrete action lacks on the ground.
I think it's not yet become widespread, whether or not some of those recent announcements, which were a long time coming in some cases, are more representative, and what the next slate of new announcements beyond what's already been moved out the door will be.
Dr. Perry, you would recall during the war in Afghanistan, the Harper government was able to move quickly on key urgent operational requirements, including airlift, armed vehicles, and helicopters. What did that period show about political will and urgency in procurement, in your opinion?
I think it showed when you really do have political will, a sense of urgency and focus, that you can move things very quickly. So it's trying to replicate some of those same conditions, not just at the top, but throughout the whole system, right down to the working level.
Are you satisfied that the current Liberal government has the same level of will when it comes to delivering and when it comes to dealing with the delayed procurements?
I think politically there's been very strong indication that there is that kind of political will and urgency. I think what we really need is some wider changes that go down into the bureaucracy to change process, change some of the policy directions, both high-level policy and administrative policy that's set government-wide, and as fast as we can, change some of the culture to refocus on speed of delivery.
And I agree. And Dr. Perry, in your opinion, what should come first in defense procurement? The need of the Canadian Armed Forces or the industrial objectives of the government of the day?
I think in reality, in most circumstances, it's always going to be a balance, but I do think we need to keep the capability for the military top of mind. I worry that in some of these industrial strategy initiatives, we're not keeping as much of a focus on actually equipping the CAF as we should.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer. Now I would like to move to Dr. Demota. You argue that Canada risks over designating too many technologies as dual use, which could misallocate funding and make it harder for D&D to identify genuinely strategic investments. In your view, is the federal government currently using the term dual use too broadly, and could that lead to taxpayer dollars being spread across projects that do not meaningfully strengthen Canada's defense capabilities?
I think my answer is no. I think NATO defines it very broadly, and they're very open to countries deciding what dual use means when they do their defense spending. I think that there needs to be more focus over time on what exactly dual use should mean for Canadian priorities, and that'll be a process, but I think it is essential to not incentivize companies and institutions to try to turn fundamental research that we've heard so much about and how important it is into targeted defense research when it doesn't have to be. I think we need the demand signal to get research to support the defense needs rather than the other way around most of the time.
One concern I have is that government may use dual use as a catch-all phrase to make spending announcements look defense-related even when the actual military benefit is unclear. What criteria should Parliament use to judge whether a dual-use investment generally contributes to Canadian Armed Force capabilities?
Going to have to stop you there. Perhaps you can provide a written response to the member's question. With that, we're going to go to MP Nathan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you, and thank you for the panelists for being here and for the panelists who's on line as well. This question is for Cambrian College. Large universities often receive much of the attention in discussions around defense innovation, but colleges play a unique role in applied research and workforce development. How can institutions like Cambrian College help bridge the gap between research, commercialization, and the skilled workforce Canada will need to support advanced manufacturing and defense innovation?
Thank you very much for that question. Yes, I think it's an important question that, especially on the implied R&D side of things, we are the bridge, especially when it comes to proving out a concept, testing and validating a new technology, and then hopefully getting that to market. And then I think through the work that colleges and CEGEPs do with applied research, we are training the next generation of workers on that technology that will be deployed. And I think by bringing colleges further into the conversation around defense and dual use, applied R&D, that will only enlighten the future workers that we have at our colleges and CEGEPs to better understand what role they could play in helping to develop and test and deploy these new technologies wherever they may be.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask you, in these courses and in these research and innovation, when that happens in the colleges, what is the gender like? Do you see a lot of females in these programs, much more than before?
Thank you for that question. I think certainly it's getting better, but obviously in an industry like mining that has traditionally been male dominated, I think you obviously see it skewing more towards male students. I think through initiatives that we've been doing at Cambrian College is the Jill of All Trades, which is an annual event to really encourage girls and young women to consider a career in skilled trades and engineering technology. That is improving. I think as society continues to shift forward, we're seeing more and more women take these opportunities to join the skilled trades. It's certainly not easy, and we still have a lot of work to do. But we do pride ourselves, especially in our group here at Cambrian College, that we do have near gender parity when it comes to the students that are working with us on applied research projects. And that includes, students that are working in programs like welding and fabrication, mechanical engineering, and IoT-based programs as well.
Thank you for that. And next question would be for Ms. Terrian. Canada produces world-class researchers and graduates in emerging fields such as artificial intelligence, quantum science, and advanced engineering. What more can government, universities, and industries do to ensure that this talent remains in Canada and contributes to Canadian innovation rather than being recruited abroad?
So I think some of the points that my colleague made earlier are fundamental to the ability to retain talent in Canada. So number one is creating the kind of ecosystems that produce the spin-offs that Canadians want to work at, want to stay at, and then having those pathways between whether it's a university or a college, as we talked about, so that that innovation cycle continues to drive itself, because it's not everywhere in the world that you are going to have top-of-the-line quantum computers, top-of-the-line quantum researchers, and companies all coming together. And when we can create those ecosystems, people don't want to leave because those ecosystems don't exist otherwise. So we need to really concentrate on building up the strengths that we do have so that we're creating the environment that allows that. But fundamental research investment, applied research investment, those are all our building blocks. And then, as we talked about, IP policy that allows us to retain our talent. And then the kind of champion programs that identify companies that are winners that we don't want to have leave our country. It's that whole menu of things that allow us to retain the Canadian talent, because it's Canadians at the end of the day that are going to protect our country.
And do you feel like we are moving in the right direction?
I think there are a lot of the building blocks, but I would be remiss to say that we need to do better at helping to retain the international talent that we attract to our universities and colleges.
Thank you. And my next question to you is, Canada benefits enormously from international collaboration in science and research. As governments strengthen research security measures, how do we ensure we remain open to global collaboration while also protecting Canadian interests and sensitive technologies?
Absolutely. So as Dr. Blais mentioned, it really depends on the kind of research that we're doing. So the fundamental research that we're doing in areas like quantum and and other areas that are technologically sensitive, it's fine for that research to be open because we're at the very fundamental level. But as we move forward towards more applied levels, it's important to have the safeguards in place in order to know who you're partnering with, who's going to have access to that research, who controls the intellectual property. And so that kind of reflection is being stimulated by policies that are at the federal level, but it is our responsibility at the university level to be applying those principles on a project-by-project level and putting in place the mechanisms to know who we're working with and why, and the kind of partnerships that are trust-based and the kind of legal agreements that allow us to be really clear about what we're doing and why and for whom.
Thank you. Thank you to our witnesses, and thank you to the members of Parliament. We've completed 2 full rounds of questioning, and seeing that the clock is past 6, is it the will of the committee to continue on for an additional round, or does the committee wish to adjourn? To adjourn? I have the agreement. This committee is adjourned. Thank you to our witnesses.